There was a conversation yesterday put out by the Spectator between Paul Embery, who's a trades union activist, and Katherine Birbalsingh, who is the Miss Tough head teacher of the Michaela School. And it's a response to the Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson's tweet, which they say reveals a telling critique of Labour's proposed VAT on private school fees. That it's basically it shows up the politics of envy. Phillipson's comment about state school students need teachers more than private schools need embossed stationery is I think it's very interesting. It's Paul Embery who says that this is a caricature, and they argue that it oversimplifies the diverse landscape of private education. There are many private schools, many of which cater to children from faith backgrounds, from the services, from who have SEND needs, whose parents have a very limited income, and who are definitely not in the same category as the children who might be attending, say, Eton or Harrow, Roedean, and so on. And to this one-size-fits-all attack by Labour is likely to inflict more damage on state schools than it's going to do good. Embury emphasises that not all private schools are elite institutions, like Harrow and Eton. Many are smaller, struggling with financial challenges similar to state schools, and the Labour policy to introduce VAT on private school fees fails to acknowledge this diversity, disproportionately harming families and schools lower on the financial scale. The tweet by Phillipson went viral and reflects a mindset that assumes all private school attendees are privileged without recognising that thousands of families on below average incomes send their children to more affordable private schools simply because the state schools in the area cannot accommodate their needs. And because they perhaps don't have the money to be able to move house to a better catchment area. Embery stresses that such a policy, should it be rolled out fully, would likely result in redundancies, a point made by the NASUWT, my union, by the NASWT Teachers Union. So it is extraordinary. The boot is now on the other foot. The teachers' unions are saying that a Labour policy is going to produce an effect which will mean workers will be out of work. This would directly affect staffing levels, especially in the already fragile state system. Ironically, more students from private schools would then transition to state schools, increasing the strain on resources and pushing state schools into further crisis without enough funding to support them. Birbalsingh adds a very practical layer to the discussion, using her own school as an example. She says, should more private students then come to her school, she will not simply need one science teacher and laboratory, she would need two. Absolutely. And her school, Michaela, is intended to support disadvantaged inner city children, but the VAT policy may divert those places to former private school students. This, she argues, harms the very children that Labour claims it wants to help. Birbalsingh dismisses the logic that denying private schools minor luxuries like embossed stationery will somehow translate into more resources or better teachers for state schools. Instead, she emphasises that the fundamental issue of teaching, workload, behavioural management and teacher retention, this is not addressed by simply increasing state school funding through VAT. We actually need to change the way we teach in the UK. We need to change the way education is delivered, and COVID has already given us a very good example of how to do this. The conversation between Emery and Birbalsingh raises important ideological questions about fairness, privilege, and government intervention. Emery points out the inconsistency of taxing education, while other services like private healthcare retain VAT exemptions. He argues that Labour is pursuing this policy to target independent education, but fails to consider other tax avenues such as windfall taxes on high street banks or raising income tax on the wealthiest. This policy, Emery and Birbalsingh suggest, risks exacerbating inequality rather than addressing it, and the key problem is not a lack of funds but misdirected policy. They both stress that Labour's plan could lead to teacher redundancies and ultimately harm the most vulnerable children in the state sector. So this is not two people from Eton or Harrow who are arguing against this policy. This is two people from Labour supporting a Labour supporting background, Birbalsingh, who may not necessarily support Labour, but she runs a state school, albeit an extraordinary one, and Emery, who is a trade unionist. They both stress that Labour's plan could lead to teacher redundancies and ultimately harm the most vulnerable children in the state sector as resources become overburdened. This is what people have been saying for the last six to 8 months. In essence, the conversation critiques the politics of envy as a poor substitute for constructive progress in education policy. And there has been no debate about changing the way we deliver education in this country. It is extraordinary, this single idée fixe based on what? Some sort of fantasy about class. The path forward, according to Emery and Birbalsingh, lies in addressing the real issues at hand, supporting teachers, managing workload, improving school infrastructure, rather than undermining one part of the education sector for the sake of political optics. I think even that isn't enough. I think we have to go further. We have to we have to set out a plan to engage with artificial intelligence, with buying in not lesson plans on bits of paper, not further handouts which are a waste of time, but buying in clear audiovisual support. So a teacher can put on a lesson which targets a particular class's needs. And the teacher can then spend their time monitoring the children's output and the children's progress. It would be possible under that structure, under the structure I'm suggesting, to actually, for one teacher to manage two different disciplines in the same class, and therefore for schools to offer a wider range of examination subjects to all students at every level, particularly catering to those interests that may be dismissed as niche. Because all interests for all children need to be encouraged. And we shouldn't just be catering to interests which fit a very, very outdated and industrialized pattern. The pattern which was set up in the 19th century to cater to cater to managing the Industrial Revolution, to cater to managing the Raj. These purposes are gone, and so therefore we need to be looking at a new form for education in our country, and hopefully that would roll out across the rest of the world, because education globally is out of date. We are playing catch up. And if YouTube and various other programs can offer, there's a thing called Udemy, I think, which offers you 12 hours of instruction in how to deal with 3D graphics. There's a system. There are systems online which offer you piano instruction in 10-minute bursts. Tremendous. This I think is the way forward in classrooms. We have already test-driven the use of computers and Zoom in classrooms during COVID. We did it very badly because we assumed that the way to use Zoom in a classroom was simply to put the Zoom camera on and continue the class as if nothing is different. Teaching by Zoom is very different to teaching in person. Zoom classes tend to be much quicker, and a different style, a different structure of pedagogy is necessary. I've been doing it for many years, by the way. I've alternated Zoom and live classes on a pretty regular basis, and I know the structure is different. I can tell you that. But I also know what happened during COVID, and a lesson which is conducted on Zoom, which is simply an ordinary teacher lesson, is unbelievably boring. And the child who is watching that Zoom lesson is simply watching, they're not participating. And children who are using computers are used to games which move at a phenomenal speed. And if our teaching doesn't move at a phenomenal speed, we're slow. It means we can get so much more information in. It means we can encourage children to process so much more, so much faster. And we can engage children through audiovisual techniques, but only if we use people who have the skills, only if we draw on that skill set. It's there, it's waiting to be used, but so far the educational authorities in Britain, and elsewhere, by the way, are very reluctant to go down that route. I don't know whether this is because of union anxiety or because of overwhelming demands on teachers in schools already. We need to send out the message that there is a system which will lighten the load for teachers, and that schools can buy in educational resources which will solve lots of their problems in one single sweep. We could be in a position to change the educational landscape of our schools, possibly even of our universities, but certainly of our schools all the way up from primary school to the end of secondary school. A revolution is here. We can seize it or we can ignore it. If we ignore it, it will be at our cost.